welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. It is Friday, and just like the Celtic team that we cover, we're hit by, well, I don't know if it's injuries or absences or what it is, but Jim's taking his well-earned rest this week, and it is just Tony and I for the foreseeable. So don't switch off yet. We can promise it's an interesting one, can't we, Tony?
And that's one word for it, yeah.
So just wanted to say a few hellos. Afternoon, Axe on Friday crew, Paddy Lavery, lovely to see you. You're always on the show and we love to see you there. ASM1, hi folks, Friday again, lovely. That Friday feeling's always a good thing. And then I just wanted to put this one up, Tony. Toshtakoglu Junior Malone. What a name, by the way. Says morning, folks, and then corrected himself. Afternoon, folks. The games just keep coming. Let's attack them one by one. Sounds like a good plan to me. Tony,
Toshtakoglu, that's the business. Like that.
Toshtakoglu, by the way, absolute belter. Just before we get into things, Tony, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but a lovely little post by an account called Donate for Daithí, which is a little boy, 5 years old, I think he is, lives in West Belfast. He's been on the heart transplant list for over 3 years. Just wanted to highlight that because he's obviously wanting to raise awareness, not just for himself, but for everybody who's on those organ transplant lists. And Rangers actually did a very nice thing and sent him a signed football as well. So great to see football crossing that divide and proving it doesn't matter in cases like that.
Without a doubt, we've had a plethora of that recently, haven't we? We had the Roar for Rory the other week there, and also the minutes applause the other night at the Hearts game for Devin Gordon. I'm all for that, Laura, yeah. And you're raising awareness for amazing causes, so football's a great leveller that way. I don't care what football team you support. You cannot look at these three individual people and the circumstances that surround the issues that they all have or had and not be affected by it or not want to do something or not care. And I think that that's one way that social media and football can be totally responsible and can work for good and work for people's benefit. So, yeah, I hope our man gets the organ donation that he thoroughly deserves. And I was delighted to see that they had the Roar for Rory, and just really sad and poignant, the circumstances and the backstory with involving the heart support of Devin Gordon, and my heart goes out to their family at this moment in time as well. But I just, that I love the fact that football can sometimes be used as a positive source for good, and I can only applaud that. And when everybody, if issues like this get highlighted and raised on your profile or your timeline, that you retweet it and you act upon it and don't let it go idly by, because it could affect anyone at any stage. So football supporters as well. So, but good to see when they all come together and do something constructive. I love that. I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, a fantastically observed minute for Devin at the game against Hearts the other night, and quite a striking thing to see the players stop and applaud as well. It was fantastic to see. Yeah. But back to Daithí. Hope he's doing well. If him or his family watches the show, or if anybody knows him, just tell him we're sending him all our best wishes. And if anybody wants to know more about organ donation and how you can get involved in making sure that you opt into that for people who need it in the future, then you can go onto his website and have a look.
It's a beautiful picture, that as well, with Daithí and the Celtic strip holding the Rangers ball, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
A wonderful snapshot of life there. Football, as you say, crossing that divide and people coming together for the right reasons. Love that.
Certainly does, and it puts into perspective all of the stuff we're about to spend the next hour talking about, but we'll spend the next hour talking about it, no questions asked. First of all, just wanted to get your thoughts, Tony, on the game against Hearts on Wednesday night, an overview, if you will, of I think everybody agrees, certainly Brian and I agreed on the match coverage the other night, that it was very much a game of two halves. There was a performance in the first half and a performance in the second half. I know you were at Tynecastle. What did you make of it?
It's great to be back at Tynecastle, I'll tell you that. It's few better grounds on a midweek night than Tynecastle. Thought Celtic were terrific the first half. They really were. O'Reilly and Hatate, and also Big Giakoumakis. Thought he led the line superbly. And his goal, it's a thing of beauty. It might look simple, but it's not. And I don't think, well, I don't know, I never saw the aftermatch show, but you cannot praise that goal enough. It's the ball in from O'Reilly, it's on the money. And a colleague of mine on the Celtic Way, Sean Martin, he did a kind of scouting report on Giakoumakis, and he mentioned the fact that most of his finishes in the Eredivisie last season were one-touch finishes, goals like that, and he flagged that up. Now, Giakoumakis is getting up to speed with Scottish football, but he's got 3 goals in 4 starts, and his last 2 have been one-touch finishes from crosses into the box delivery, right? He's made them look easy, and they've been the hardest chances of the match, right? So you look at that and you think, nuts and bolts of a player there. Hatate, you just love him, don't you? I'll refrain from singing it, or will I? No, I won't. You know my thoughts on Hatate. Really impressed with Matt O'Reilly. I just thought he looked composed. Yeah, he tired, but it was a lot of the team tired, but see the way Celtic play and they manoeuvre themselves into that winning position at 2-0. It's terrific. And then, the levels drop, and I know Alan Morrison was working on some kind of article saying how they can overcome this energy levels dropping and stuff, but then is that down to maybe substitutions being made earlier? I don't know. I'll never query the manager and his tactics and what he thinks. But it was obviously a tapering off in the second half. It was the original game of 2 halves, wasn't it? And even on 62 minutes on the park, Jota was terrific.
Absolutely, yeah.
He was outstanding. And I joked the other day. I said that Michael Smith left the park with a damaged ego. He just couldn't cope with Jota. You know what I mean? And Hatate's goal also said that should have got its own show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival because it was a thing of beauty. But yeah, I mean, there was lots to like about Celtic the first half. Second half, typical through the ringer performance, wasn't it? They just do it. There's always a mad 10 minutes, isn't there? And they do it against most opposition because as Ange and yourself and myself, Brian and all the guys that have contributed, it's that kind of lack of a killer edge, clinical, ruthless edge to really finish off teams. They did it once this season at Easter Road when they went 3 up in jig time and the game was done. And then they just game management the second half. They could have done that against Hearts. They could have been 3 up at half time and the game would have been done. But Hearts got their goal, they got the penalty, we got a bit of fortune. You move on, you take your 3 points because it's a vital 3 points. So, overall estimate of that is just it was a must win and they won.
Well, it was that, and there was a lot of good points in terms of the way the team handled the match that I felt we probably wouldn't have done previously. The way that the performance went in the second half, I could have seen so many times, especially the way we played last season and a bit of the season before. That's the type of second half we'd have lost the match or at least drawn it, we would have crumbled underneath the pressure, I think.
And do you know what as well, Laura? I was talking to my dad and he made a good point as well. I'm actually glad Joe Hart dived the wrong way. You see if he dives the right way, that hits the post, hits him and goes in.
Yeah.
Because the way the ball traversed across the goal line, so we got a major break there, but
he almost had time to get up and get out the way of it. Yeah.
And always, so I'm actually, when I thought about it, I thought, God, he's right, so I thought, but they showed a real bit of resilience and character. I think, as you said there, alluded to, teams of the past might have folded, or they might have gave away the 2-goal lead, chucked it away. So that's what the manager's instilled there, and he made a point of referencing that as well. Your big players stood up to the plate having not played together. Hatate, O'Reilly, Giakoumakis, Cameron Carter-Vickers. I'd love to see him walking about his house, because if he's as unruffled as that playing in a game of that magnitude and with a vital 3 points at stake, then nothing will faze him.
Just don't find yourself in his house uninvited. I can't imagine it would go well for you, you know?
Yeah, of course. I mean, people have their whipping boys, don't they? And Starfelt still seems to get it, but did he do much wrong the other night?
Yeah, I've said about Starfelt. I got a bit of a slagging actually. One of the games the last couple of weeks where I described his performances as fine, and to be honest, like that's not a criticism of the guy. I just want my defenders to be there to do the job. I don't need them to be spectacular. I don't need them to be the Rolls-Royce footballer that Van Dijk was. I just want them to do the job that they're there to do, and he certainly seems to be finding his feet and doing that.
Defend. First and see when that ball comes whipping across the box and he slides in and wallops it away. That's what I want my defenders to do. You know, that's you can go through the whole team, but I thought Greg Taylor and Juranovic weren't great. Forrest was still ring rusty, still needs matches, and I was surprised that Forrest came into the team because I thought he might have played a badder. So these are just things that I'm not saying nitpicking, but just observations more than anything else. But I was really chuffed with the way they played because that was a tough game, and playing with that team who Hatate himself said it. He was asked what it was like to play with O'Reilly, and he said, "I don't really know him." And you talk about the communication barrier as well. He was talking about that, and that needs to improve. He had a few I don't even know how many training sessions he'd had with them, but they were thrown together. And up until Big Beaton starts playing basketball in the penalty box, he was actually pretty accomplished and doing the dirty work good and just, being that kind of anchor man. But again, he'd a 15 minutes where you thought, what are you doing, big man? And maybe lucky to escape kind of punishment and stuff for misdemeanors, but just stick to what you're good at. Don't have his heart failure, basically.
Well,
as Jim calls it, yeah.
Louis Callahan on YouTube comments agrees with you. O'Reilly looks a player, and he certainly does. But I wanted to touch back on a player that you were talking about before, and Pedro Mick says perhaps the only Gio who will be lifting trophies isn't the one the press hoped it'd be this season. Now, I don't know what he could be alluding to, but we'll talk about our Greek striker Giakoumakis. Like you said, he seems to be a player who thrives on those one-touch finishes, on being around, sniffing around the 6-yard box. I made the point the other night on the match coverage that I think in the modern game, okay, we have to progress, we have to change the way and update and adapt to the way football is played, but there's still a bit of me that feels like if a striker can do what he did the other night, be in the right place, get the service, tap the ball in, if that's all he provides us with, surely that's enough for a striker.
Listen, the manager has been talking this guy up, maybe for his confidence levels or whatever. He knows exactly what he's got with Giakoumakis, right? He might not be as mobile as Kyogo and Maeda. We know that for a fact, right? But if you put the ball into that danger area, he will score. His 3 goals have been one-touch finishes. His goal against St Johnstone, Ralston rattled the ball across the goal, and it came at him from behind, and he volleyed it in. He's volleyed a on-the-money delivery from Scales, top corner, volley, no thought about it. And then the other night, to have the presence of mind, 1, to be in the position, and 2, to scoop it over Souttar's foot. It's the scoop thing. To get elevation on it. Because he connects with that and just trundles it low. Souttar smacks it away, or it cannons off Souttar, or, the defender clears it. So he's got the presence of mind to actually go in and then angle his body because it's coming behind him again and lift it into the net. It is a predatory, brilliant striker's goal. See if Larsson scores that, people go mental. I'm not comparing the two. I'm comparing the finish before people go tonto and say, what I mean? I'm talking about the actual predatory instinct to get in there where it hurts and score a goal, which is the hardest part of football, and have that instinct to do it. So I'm saying that to me was a Larsson-esque finish. No, you understand what I mean by that, don't you? How many times did Henrik get in front of somebody, a low ball coming in, and sweep it home? You took it for granted after a while. This is clearly Giakoumakis' forte, and I'm bigging up the goal because it seems so simple, but it's not, because everything about it was great. And then O'Reilly's cross is just begging to be put away, isn't it? And and I think, as Giakoumakis said, his season's starting now. This is the hungry Giakoumakis that we wanted to see. And Ange mentioned the penalty. He's clearly said to him, don't let that penalty be your defining moment of this season, because there's much more time and I'm relying on you now. So he's got his chest puffed out, because the other night he just looked like a different animal altogether up front. Right? And that's all you want, Laura. And then when the ball's put in that area, you want your striker to score. And he did. And he scored what's turned out to be the clinching goal. So, from small acorns, go and repeat it on Saturday. And then, if you're of a mind to, do it against the Rangers. And,
Nobody would be objecting to that. And Rhino on YouTube, love the avatar, by the way, just remembering Big Caesar there. GG's job is to score goals. He has a great conversion rate. That goal the other night was unreal. So, like you say, had it been Larsson, people would have been going mental for it. But Polymorphous on YouTube also mentions it wasn't just the goal. GG made plenty of good runs into the box and wasn't found. Might not be as mobile as Kyogo or as Maeda, but he's mobile enough. Do you agree with that? Do you think he's maybe not getting the credit he deserves for what he's actually managed to do so far?
Listen, I thought he led the line superbly well the other night in a game that was massive for Celtic. They had to win it, and they did. He played a huge part in it. He scored the winning goal. You know, you're judged on your contribution. As long as he's making those runs, Laura, if players aren't finding them, then it's not his fault, is it? But he get in where it mattered, and he made the most telling contribution of the game, because that's the goal that's won the match. So, you know, he can only do... You know, you're only as good as the service, aren't you? A striker. But as long as he's making those runs and he's willing to go in there and do it, then it's up to others to find them. You know, and when they do find them, then that's the moments of quality that separate you from being a good striker and a great striker. Yeah,
I mean, I think the problem is, and I said this before the game actually the other night, was we've sometimes we can be a little bit, I don't know what the word is. Well, yeah, I do know what the word is. A little bit premature in our judgment of players. I think Alan Morrison, when we were having the discussion the other night, said that on average it takes around 900 minutes, so 10 full games of 90 minutes to judge a player properly. Giakoumakis is nowhere near that for a number of reasons. He wasn't fit when he came in. He's had a couple of injuries. You know, I think if he takes this opportunity while other players are injured or on international duty, if he takes a chance, somebody said to me the other night, if he scores a couple of goals against Hearts and Rangers, does your opinion of him change? And I says, well, absolutely. Like, there's no question about it.
And he knows that himself, Laura, because he bought himself some time after the Alloa game with the interview and said, my season starts now. No, because people look and say, you've only scored against Alloa, and that's fine. Still a top drawer finish. Doesn't matter what opposition you're playing against, it's still a top drawer finish. I look at that and see the nuts and bolts of a striker there. The raw material is there for me. And he will get better with games because he's still getting to know these guys as well. Because he's no played, he's no featured. And everybody got on his case because of the lackadaisical nature of his penalty against Livingston. In injury time, when they expect a striker to run up and batter it and hammer it home, and you know, it was a crucial 2 points that were dropped and everybody felt it that day, and he bore the brunt of that, you know, and he's had to carry that because he's not had an opportunity through injury, and he's desperate to show people, that's no me, that's a blip. And the one man that was telling us that's no him, that's a blip, was the manager, because he watches him every day in training, so he knows what he's got with Giakoumakis, you know, and there's a kind of, that's, Ange would never be smug, but you get the feeling that he's sitting there the other night thinking, told you so. If you listen, you know, I'm not going to sit, but, you know, flicking metaphorical V signs at people, you know. And I asked him the question after it about the nature of the goal. And that's when he spoke about it was my question. I said, look, it's the nature of that goal that would have pleased you most. Both players involved, but Giakoumakis, you know, himself with that kind of finish. and then he spoke about the penalty that he'd said to him, look, that's the pressure that you're under when you're. He said the Celtic number 9, obviously, where's number 7, but he meant the main striker. You know, that burden of responsibility is heavy on your shoulders. You have to score. So see, when you miss penalties like that, you know, people will get on your case, and they will, as you say, make premature judgments and say things, yada yada. But if you score goals, of course your opinion will change of him if he scores against Hearts, Dundee United and Rangers, because it shows we have another striker at the club who can produce when it matters in the big moments in the big games. That's all you want, Laura.
100%. I think he can only go from strength to strength from here. I hope he builds on it, and I hope he puts himself in the contention. We talk so often about players getting their opportunity and forcing other players coming back into the team to be the one to say, no, take the shirt off me. And if we've got a bunch of strikers who are there fighting it out, taking ownership of the shirt and saying, no, if you want it back, you've got to earn it off me, then that's only the better for the team as a whole. Before we move on to another section of discussion that I wanted to talk about, I just wanted to highlight this from Danielle F. Danielle, we see her a lot on the show. She comments a lot. She's a long-time viewer. But this is just an example, Tony, of what I'm talking about with the Donate for Daithí. Everybody thinks that would never happen to me. That would never happen to anybody I know. That would never happen to anybody I love. Here we are, 700 people watching this stream, 750 people, and we've got at least one person who's been a direct beneficiary of an organ donor transplantation. Danielle says, please get on the transplant list. Got my liver transplant 2 years ago and wouldn't be here without my angel donor. That just puts it all in perspective, doesn't it?
Brilliant, Danielle. Excellent. I'm glad you are here and you are a regular contributor because I see your name coming up a lot. So delighted for yourself and well done, your angel donor. And here's hoping we can all join the list and maybe Daithí can get his angel donor. That'd be great. What
is it they say? They say it about money, but I think it applies to organs as well. You can't take them with you, so may as well go to somebody else. Thanks everybody for watching. As we say, there's over 700 of you watching at the moment across our platforms. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Get subscribed, get your notifications on to know when we go live, and that includes football content, music content, long-form interviews. We've got a long-form interview coming up with the one and only Alan Thompson, Tony, at the weekend. What are your memories of Alan Thompson as a Celtic footballer?
Regularly scoring against the Rangers, I think you'll find. And not just ordinary goals, some brammers. Everyone remembers that one in the last minute where he just plucked out there and scalped it past Kloss. But my personal favourite was the one he weaved in and out at Ibrox and then bent the curler. I think it was the second goal and a 2-0 winner. Honestly, such an underrated goal against Rangers at Ibrox because he just did it with ease and he kind of did it with 1 foot. And I'm like, wow, what a beautiful, beautiful goal. It was kind of like, I'm a good player. I'll show you how good I am. You know, most people's most enjoyable game at Ibrox round about that Martin O'Neill period was the 3-0 game and we both scored twice and Henry got his 50th. Mm-hmm. I would say that one as well runs it close because Thompson was brilliant that day and that was a thing of beauty. And he also had his moments at Ibrox. He liked a sending off as well at Ibrox, didn't he? But he got stuck in, that's why he got sent off. So, loved Alan Thompson as a player. I thought he had what was known in the trade as the cultured left foot, wasn't it? Is that what they say? And
why people don't ever have a cultured right foot, I don't know, but there's always a cultured left foot.
There's always a cultured left foot, yeah, but he was a man that stood up to be counted against Rangers many times and scored a lot of vitally important derby goals. So, good player and also scored the goal that beat Barcelona. So, I don't think there was nothing that Alan Thompson didn't do when he was a Celtic player, you know, so he'll be fondly remembered.
I always wonder about him. Not that it will bother too many people in this stream, I would think, but I always wonder why he didn't get more of an opportunity with England, considering they were always looking for that left-sided midfielder. You know, they used to farm Paul Scholes out that way. They always talked about, Ryan Giggs played for the schoolboys and then never made it because he went and played for Wales. And acted as if they didn't have any other option. And there you go, you had a guy who could take set pieces, who could cross a ball as well as anybody I'd seen, never get his chance. It's one of those things, isn't it? I think sometimes that out of sight, out of mind is a problem with English players in Scotland sometimes.
He was still the first England player, the first player to get capped for England while playing in Scotland, wasn't he? I believe. But he never got more caps for England because he played in Scotland. Because that's their attitude towards the Scottish game. But Celtic and Rangers back then had teams that were terrific and who could hold their own easily in Europe. You know, it was one of probably the height when Martin O'Neill's side was there. That Celtic team bestrode Europe, played everybody. So Alan Thompson was playing in a team that was, you know, could go into combat with anybody in Europe, the best. You know, so how anybody can say or look down their nose in Scottish football back then when Alan Thompson was playing and say, nah, he's still not good enough for England, it's just utter nonsense. You know,
it was very much. You hear the players talk now from that Martin O'Neill era, and the fact we had to play Liverpool, we had to play Blackburn and that Seville run, and it was very much part of the motivation, wasn't it? Larsson wanted to prove that he hadn't wasted his prime years. He was as good a player as everybody thought he was. He just wanted to be at Celtic. Chris Sutton had left England under a bit of a cloud after kind of flopping at Chelsea. Alan Thompson, the same. The only one you would say was maybe on an upward trajectory when he came to us was maybe Neil Lennon. And that was understandable that he came because of the connection with Martin O'Neill. But there was so much about that team, wasn't there, that it was about proving people wrong constantly, and Alan Thompson was a major part of that.
You talk about that game at Anfield, Laura. John Hartson spoke to me recently, and he's told many people, but that Martin O'Neill's team talk that night in the Anfield dressing room, he said, Liverpool, Anfield, may as well go up the road. He said, nobody beats Liverpool at Anfield. You know? And then he said, look around you. He says, there's Alan Thompson, there's John Hartson, there's Henrik Larsson, there's Neil Lennon, there's Paul Lambert. He said, these guys will dig you out a hole. Can you look your fellow teammate in the eye and see you'll do the same for him? And they were punching walls and punching that "this is Anfield" sign as they headed out. And John Hartson said, honestly, it was like the hairs in the back of your neck. He said it was unbelievable. He said he really came into his own that night. He said it was an unbelievable team talk. And he said we all walked out there. We weren't going to lose. He said we just weren't losing that game. You know, and then Alan Thompson's hit the daisy cutter. Hartson's hit the screamer. You know, and that's, you know, that was the epitome of that Celtic team. Those players could cope.
Yeah.
You know, with anything and with anybody. You look at the teams that came to Celtic Park and left with nothing in the Champions League. You know, so you could list them all. Juventus, Bayern Munich, Man U, you know, everybody came and went with nothing, tails between their legs. You know? And we're in a game. But that was a Celtic team who everybody who was around that era loved it because they knew that they were no just we're in with a chance here. They were kind of like, we're going to win this. That kind of thing. So culminating in Seville and Thompson and all of his teammates being a huge part of that. You know, big players for Celtic in a big era. So why Alan Thompson never get more England caps is beyond me, because if you do know, or you think you know something about football, you know, his England cap tally is it's measly, and not through his own fault and not through a lack of ability, because the boy could play.
Like I say, it would have been less frustrating for me if they didn't constantly go on about the fact they didn't have a left-sided midfielder when we were watching one every week, you know. But Paradise 63 totally agrees with me. My favourite Alan Thompson goal is his, a brilliant free kick against Liverpool. Not even necessarily for the free kick. It wasn't the most beautiful free kick you've ever seen. He went under the wall when it jumped up, but I loved the celebration after, where he was kind of spanking the left boot and dusting it off and all that kind of stuff, as if there you go.
But it's moments, Laura. It's big moments. That when Hartson scored, everybody's thought after that was we could win the FA Cup.
Yeah.
I don't care what any Celtic supporter says. That in that moment when Hartson rattles that into the net, people are going on the internet to book tickets for the final or get on the list because they're thinking this team's good enough to go all the way.
And for anybody, any younger folk watching, yes, the internet did exist back then. It was still a thing, you know, maybe not as ubiquitous as it is now, but it did exist. So, yeah, that's just a little precursor to what you'll see coming. Paul John is going to be interviewing Celtic great Alan Thompson on the channel in the coming days, so keep an eye out for that. It was recorded in the last couple of days and it's going to be up soon, so I certainly will be switching on my notifications so that I can watch that as soon as it goes live. Tony, back to the present day and a little bit into the future, in fact. We've got Dundee United at the weekend. It opens up a conversation that before we look at Dundee United and how we'll line up, as it says in the strapline, I saw an interesting thing in some of the coverage this week that Butcher, the player who so aptly named, was involved in that tackle on David Turnbull the last time we played Dundee United and had his yellow card upgraded to a red. He said, you know, that he will not be changing the way he plays. He doesn't really care that people see him the way that he does. I'll try and read out exactly what it said. Here it is. Will I change? It's how I play on the edge of the game. I don't want red cards because it's not ideal, but it's the way I play and always has been. I was disappointed with how the Celtic one was dealt with on the back of my previous red, but it won't change how I play the game. It's how I play and it's when I'm at my best. If I change, you won't get the real Callum Butcher. Some might say that's an advantage, but we remain to be convinced. The reason I wanted to bring that up was it's a perfect example of something that we've been talking about, something that we saw in the Alloa game with Niang and with King against Callum McGregor, causing the horrific injury he's got. We saw more horrendous challenges against Hearts the other night. This issue of protection with referees, now I know people watching will be bored senseless of talking about it, but it's something that I want to keep talking about for as long as we are still having these issues. Now, you and I agree with each other. We are not conspiracy theorists. We don't believe that referees, and correct me if I'm wrong in putting words in your mouth, but we don't tend to believe that referees go out with a deliberate decision made. I am going to make sure Celtic don't win this football match. It's more about competency, isn't it? It's seeing the consistent lack of not only the lack of competency and skill amongst the referees, but the lack of consistency in the way that they apply things. There were things that we were getting booked for against Hearts the other night that he wasn't even going near his pocket when worse things were happening on their end. What did you make of the referee's performance in the last couple of games? And do you think Ange has a point when he's saying about this protection? Is it something we really need to be pushing home?
Chose his moment, Ange, didn't he? He mentioned protection and nailed it. Got it bang on the money. He said, at every league I've been in, we've had referees come in and say, that's outlawed, that's outlawed, that's outlawed. Did it happen? He's clearly not had that at Celtic, has he?
No.
Or has he? Well, that's the point he's making. So, you know, referees have a duty to protect players. You know, if Callum Butcher wants to not change his style and change the way he plays, so be it. That's fine. That's the player that he is. That's what gives him his edge. So be it. Well, see, if you're a referee, you know that's the way Callum Butcher plays. You watch Callum Butcher, don't you? Or you should. Yeah. Or you should. And see if he produces something like he did at Tannadice, it's an automatic red card. You know, you cannot give someone the benefit of the doubt on that one. It's an automatic red card. You saw it in real time. Don't need VAR for that one. So I get back to the question I've always asked. What are they seeing then? And why are they not allowed to explain it to help supporters, managers, players understand more? Because if they could come out and explain their decisions, then you might not agree with it, but at least you get a handle on why they did it. And yeah, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just think the refs are rank rotten. They're totally and utterly inept. Every referee. There is not one good referee in Scottish football. There, I've said it. Because I've watched them all this season. Every one of them. And every one of them, you just turn around and you shake your head and you think, my goodness, what are you doing? You know, you talk about protection. We spoke off there twice this season. Celtic have had players with head knocks, and the referees let play go on for a lot of minutes. Carol Starfelt against Ross County, yeah. Alan Muir was the ref, and Alloa, Don Robertson. Doesn't matter who the ref is, they would all have done the same thing. And there is a real duty of care when it's head knocks, isn't there? I believe. Yet twice this season, Celtic players have suffered from that, and referees have let, because Ange pointed to the fact that McGregor had a concussion. There's a player with concussion on the park, Don Robertson. There's a player with concussion. Doesn't matter if you don't think that it was intentional, but see, when you look back on it, it's a hell of a lot more serious when you see the injury to Callum McGregor in the incident than Don Robertson ever thought it was.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, there's a man down with a head knock, and his cheeks like that. His cheeks like something you see in the cartoons. When somebody gets a cartoon doing and the lump swells up and all that kind of stuff. So how he can let play go on and not halt it, and a real duty of protection to that footballer there. And we're highlighting, I've said this before people say you've got selective memory. My job is to watch Celtic matches and dissect them. That's what I do for a living. I don't have selective memory. I'll say this and I'll say it again. The officials are rank rotten, and they're rank rotten for every team this season. So Motherwell fans, Rangers fans, United fans, Ross County, Aberdeen, you will have your own personal litany of decisions for referees, or refereeing decisions that have not gone your way and have been out of order this season. And I get that, and I'd be quite interested actually to see them. But we talk about Celtic players, particularly this season, that duty of protection and care, even Ange said it, it's been sadly lacking from what we're watching for the club that we support and we comment on. And there's been, the two head knocks, but then you're talking about the bone crushers or what are they called now, ankle biting tackles. Is that what it's now? They're now being referred to, ankle biters. Doesn't matter. They're against the laws of the game. And Ange wants to know why he hasn't been sat down and told. How can any manager of a football club say to his players, don't tackle? Because you'll end up getting hurt. And how sad is that he's had to admit that to protect his own players, to say to them, look, don't get involved here. Tantamount to saying, look, just launch it. There is no point here. I think that you see that statement in itself. That's telling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I told my players not, to protect themselves, not to tackle. Seriously. See, if you're in the SFA or a referee, you should be listening to that and saying, or in the governing body and saying, why is that? What's happened here? How can we help? Here, why is a foreign manager with an obdurate eye, and I keep getting back to that, had to point out something that's so blatantly obvious?
Yeah, it's unreal. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted because I believe just beyond this window behind me there might be a tree or something getting chopped down outside. So if anybody can hear that, then I do apologise. You're getting a drill straight in your ears, but we'll crack on regardless. I totally agree with everything you said there. It's not about conspiracy theories. It's not about thinking that our club is harder done to. Now, there will be cases where people have a legitimate point to say that they think Celtic are being harder done to than anybody else. But at the end of the day, it comes down to safety for me. Safety of the players, whoever they play for, whatever team they represent. It's about, making sure that injury on David Turnbull didn't turn out to be a leg breaker if he'd had his stud in the ground. Making sure that Callum McGregor wasn't completely knocked out and had swallowed his tongue before he decided to stop the game. For example, the referee's got so much to keep his eye on, there's no way he could have assessed that as quickly as he did and said, right, we're not getting the medical team on. But Edward Diver gets a good point across here, says, get Big Sutton on, Tony, and ask him his views on this. Now, anybody on watching this show, I'm sure will know Chris Sutton's views. They'll know Dawn Astle's views, daughter of Jeff Astle. Head injuries are becoming more and more an issue in the modern game. You see, I read a piece in the Herald that talked about the field study that said, I can't remember the exact figures, but the amount of Alzheimer's, dementia and motor neuron disease amongst ex-footballers is multiple times the number it is amongst the general population. It really is something we need to take more seriously, isn't it?
Of course it is. We lost another footballing legend in midweek, Celtic legend, but footballing legend, Wim Jansen, 75, dementia. The correlation's there. Chris Sutton's been pointing out for years, with his dad. The last story I ever wrote when I left the Daily Record was that very story, that Chris with his dad. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear Chris talking about it because it's a major contributory factor. So you talk about protection, and certainly in football, it's protecting these guys for later life as well, and how any referee, when a player has a head knock, doesn't he just call a halt? I mean, it's paramount, importance now. Doesn't matter how serious or less serious it is, you have to stop the game, Laura. That's just that. To me, that's patently obvious. Yet, 2 instances in Dingwall and at the Indodrill, as you say, Callum McGregor could have swallowed his tongue. Carl Starfelt could have had teeth knocked out or whatever, right? Now, fine, you have to stop the game. But I remember when we were talking about Starfelts and I was kind of like, get on with it because I didn't think it was particularly bad, but he still went down, he had blood, fine, right? And I get that. So some are less serious than others, but it doesn't really matter.
But that's the point I'm making, Tony. I'd rather the game was stopped and you found out it wasn't as serious than the other way round.
Of course. So it's incumbent on referees to do that, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If somebody goes down clutching their head, then you have to stop the football match because the consequences in later life, as we all know, have are dire. And in some cases are now fatal. And Chris Sutton will tell you that, and the Jansen family will tell you that, the Astle family will tell you that. How long can football ignore this? I think Alan Shearer did a documentary on it, didn't he?
He did. I mean, you're talking about that being 5 or 6 years ago now, half a decade, and at that time he was calling for things, and I don't think there's been much movement on it since then either.
And Chris Sutton's been calling for it for years and years and years, and there's not been much movement there. There's been no willingness in football to accept that this is part of, people suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, and there's a correlation with football further down the line. And I think the medical profession and football have to accept that the dots are now being joined. It's happened too many times, Laura, isn't it, to the older generation of footballers? And if you can help this generation and generations to come, then you have to look into it and start protecting footballers, on the park.
Do you know the one thing I was going to say, and if anybody in the comments can remember his name, it's escaped my mind, but one example of a referee doing exactly what he should was the referee who refereed the match in which Christian Eriksen collapsed during the Euros. I firmly believe that referee contributed to saving Christian Eriksen's life that day. It was swift, immediate action, and there was medical staff on the pitch immediately, and that is what you want. He didn't know if it was serious. He didn't have the training to know if it was serious enough, and it turned out it was about as serious as it gets. And Christian Eriksen's still here today, probably in part because of his actions.
Isn't that what they are trained for, though, Laura, to spot that? That's why
I would hope so.
I'm a referee, and that's part of your training. I know he's not trained medically, but trained to spot when a player's in distress. When you should stop the game, when there's a serious injury or what looks like something, a serious issue on the park. Mm-hmm. So, as you say, big up to that referee as well. someone won't tell us in the comments his name, but you know, you are guided by the actions of those who are in charge. And referees are in charge of football matches. And I can't for the life of me understand why Scottish referees are so bad. And there's a whole group of them that are bad. Who's the best referee in Scotland, Laura?
I mean, I would hazard to even guess a name because you would get slaughtered either way.
Yeah, but there's not one that leaps out at you and you say, he's the best of a bad bunch. They're just a bad bunch now, all of them.
And the thing that frustrates me about it is we've had managers and coaches come to Largs for years. Every manager you can think of has had some form of training in Scotland and gone to the top of the game. Bobby Robson, Jose Mourinho, Alex Ferguson, you name them and they will have been to Scotland for some period of time as part of their training. Why can we produce such top class managers and not have the same standards of training and things for referees? It absolutely baffles me. But Ryan Kelly has helpfully come in and says English referee Anthony Taylor did the game in which Ericsson collapsed, Laura. So thanks, Ryan, for highlighting that. Well done to Anthony Taylor. That really was an outstanding memory for me from when that happened, that he was so swift. But we'll move on to other things. Obviously, we'll come back to Wim Jansen at the end of the show. I want to get your thoughts, Tony, on memories of him, and we'll close the show out with him. No making us greet, obviously, but I can't promise anything, obviously. But we'll look ahead just a little bit before that to the game against Dundee United at the weekend. Now, obviously, we want to keep this good run going. We want to make sure that we keep the pressure on Rangers as much as we can. They've dropped points in recent weeks, so we know that they are feeling the pressure a little bit, or we hope they are at least. Do you think we can continue the run we've been on against Dundee United, or are the number of internationals and injuries going to catch up with us at some point over the next few weeks?
There's no reason to suggest that Celtic can't keep up their run. You live for the day when it all clicks into place, Laura. Because somebody will take an Inverness Clacknacuddin. That's a scudding to you and I, right? If Celtic convert their chances, a high ratio of the chances that they create, somebody's going to cop it at some point. Because they are, when they're dominant, they're really dominant, they're pretty rampant. But the manager and yourselves and myself, we keep going back to the fact that we're just negligent in chances in front of goal. We've been talking about it from day one. When I was talking about Kyogo getting a double hat-trick instead of a hat-trick, I was making the point that you'll not beat everybody 6-0. There'll be games like St Mirren when you need that one to go in and it doesn't. But when you start converting chances and it becomes second nature, and you're putting teams away clinically, it becomes, you don't think about it. So Celtic are creating a lot of things, and opportunities to get themselves ahead, get themselves ahead handsomely. So that's why you're tearing your hair out. The football's no question that there are certain parts of, especially the first halves of games, they seem to be adopting this let's blow opposition away and then game management. But 2-0 is always a precarious lead, isn't it? And they seem to be able to get themselves into a 2-0 lead and then the inevitable happens, somebody scores, there's panic for 10, 15 minutes and then kind of regroup and see it out. But I'm mindful of the fact Dundee United came and took a draw, one each, when they came out and played that day. But I think Jota was in a personal vendetta to hit the woodwork and the crossbar and post challenge, I think he was on. He was really unlucky that day, wasn't he? 3 times he scalped the woodwork. So these things happen. But there's no reason to suggest that Celtic can't keep up the pressure at the top and beat Dundee United. And then you move on to Wednesday and it's the exact same scenarios.
And you're rubbing your hands together.
Well, the exact same scenario as the Wim Jansen season. They're playing to go a point behind them. If Rangers beat Ross County, they're playing to go a point behind, or Rangers go 7 in front. And we all know what happened then.
Yeah, it's a funny thing that you mentioned there about, the game plan appears to be that we blow teams away and then game manage. I've seen other people bring up the point that they don't feel it's necessarily in the planning. It's that we go hammer and tongs and then wear ourselves out. Where do you stand on that debate? Do you think there's some ground in that, or do you think it is more a case of that it's a more deliberate choice on our part?
I don't know really what the game plan is, but they look as if they go for the quick kill, don't they? Mm-hmm. And then retreat, that kind of thing. But I think there's a bit of both. Mm-hmm. You'd have to ask Ange, but he likes that kind of breakneck speed, and everybody always talks about the early goal that settles them down and they play the football. If they don't get the early goal, they struggle. The object of the exercise is to score goals. So whether you do it in the first minute or 90th minute, you win the game is immaterial. But Celtic try and come out the blocks, especially at Celtic Park. They usually spring out the traps pretty quickly, don't they? Or they try to. And try and get themselves ahead and then try and build on that, and then there's a kind of tapering off because you just can't keep that up for 90 minutes. So I would actually be I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the kind of planning, see how Ange approaches it, because I think it would be quite intriguing, because you can see there's a real intensity to the first half with Celtic, isn't there? A real intensity. You saw it at Easter Road, you've seen it in glimpses this season where the football, especially in the first half, has been pretty breathtaking at times. And then, kind of, as I say, there's that tapering off, and I get all that. But, if it all comes together one day and they play like that for 90 minutes, somebody will take a tanking. And a real hammer. But and that's because they'll create a lot of chances. Who knows? Giakoumakis might end up with a double hat-trick that I was talking about with you tomorrow or something. I doubt it, but you'll have no hope.
I had wee butterflies in my stomach when that first early goal went in against Hearts, because I predicted in the pre-match coverage that we'd get a Giakoumakis hat-trick, and it didn't materialise, but it was close enough. Speaking of which, you saw the way we lined up against Hearts the other night. Do you expect many changes for the game tomorrow, or do you think it'll be much of a muchness?
The only change I would make, Laura, is Abada in for Forest.
Right. Why is that?
I think Abada can feel hard done by, because he scored a brilliant goal against Alloa and he's hitting a wee kind of rich vein of form. Mm-hmm. And likewise, when Abada got dropped from the side, people said he tapered off and Forrest came back in and then he got injured. So I would just like, Abada's got 11 goals and I think he's played 34, 35. That's not a bad return.
No, especially for somebody who's not an out-and-out striker.
Yeah. So and I just felt the other night, James, he looked a bit ring rusty and, didn't contribute a lot. And then when he was involved, his shots at goal were wayward and pretty powder puff, and then Abada came on, and it didn't do too much when Abada came on, but I think he was probably thinking, why did I not start? But I want players to feel hard done by not starting. Mm-hmm. But the good thing about it is that's the dilemma Ange's got. He's got options now with Forrest and Abada. I'm equally comfortable with either or playing against Dundee United tomorrow. My own preference tomorrow would be Abada, because he tried Jamesy the other night and I didn't think Jamesy had his best game, but I'm still a big James Forrest fan. I think he contributes a lot, assists and steps up to the plate in big games. So, if he's going to alternate the two, so be it. I think maybe tomorrow it's Abada's turn and the rest stay as is. Because it's still a strong team they put out.
Yeah.
And we've got players to come back 5 or 6 to make us even stronger.
I'll give you that. You've timed that well, waiting until Jim's not on the show to call for Abada to start. That's well timed.
I can hear Jim going, boo! Throwing things at me,
Having said that, Pablo67 on YouTube agrees with you, and I think a lot of people in the comments, from what I can see, do Abada needs to start. To be honest, I'm the same as you. I wouldn't be too shocked or too disappointed if Forrest did start, but if Abada starts, I can see the rationale behind it as well, so it's an interesting one. We shall see, and as always, as you can expect from Axon, we will be doing the pre-match coverage from half an hour before kick-off, half-time and full-time coverage, as always, as we've done with every Celtic game so far this season. Line-up still to be confirmed, but we will let you know as soon as possible who is going to be doing that coverage for you. It will just be guaranteed that it will be happening anyway tomorrow, half an hour before kick-off. Leaving that until tomorrow to discuss in more depth, Tony, I wanted to close out the show talking about Wim Jansen and his sad death. Now, it was obviously confirmed, as you mentioned earlier in the show, that he was like our poor little Bertie who lost his life earlier in the season. Confirmed in October 2021 that Wim was also battling dementia. I don't like to follow you on these things, so I'm going to go first as far as Wim is concerned. I was a child when Wim Jansen came in as manager. My knowledge of football was not what it is now. Some people would say it's still not great, but it certainly wasn't what it is now. So I had no idea of his playing career, of his journey as an international footballer to World Cup management, to the World Cup final, sorry. I had no idea of his history as a manager either. All I saw was this kind of jolly-looking, curly-haired man who had what I would go on to learn was a nice disposition about him. You'll obviously be able to tell me better than I know how he handled people in the press and things like that and what kind of a person he was, but he had every virtue and every mannerism and every personality trait I would want in a Celtic manager. He seemed to take his football seriously but not take himself seriously. He was a gentleman in every sense of the word from what I saw. For me, he'll always have a special place in my heart as Celtic manager because he brought the first title that I can remember as a Celtic supporter. He stopped Rangers winning the 10, making life as unbearable or more unbearable than it was growing up in Glasgow at the time. He brought us Henrik Larsson, he brought us so many other things, but you know, Brian mentioned in the group chat the other night, and I've been pondering it for days and days and days, and I can't come up with an answer. A person in Celtic history who's made more of an impact in a single season than Wim Jansen, I'm not sure I can think of somebody. And that speaks volumes for the man, considering the number of great footballers and football managers we've had at this club. I'll just finish off by saying he will be greatly missed by me and so many others. And I'll leave the floor to you to talk a bit about Wim Jansen on the week that we lost him.
The saddest fact about Wim Jansen in my career is that they never coincided. From those that I've spoken to who were around, like Murdo MacLeod, who was a columnist at the Record, he says a wonderful man. Paul Lambert says a wonderful manager. Burley says a wonderful manager. But I wrote a tribute on the Celtic Way the other day, and I shared this story. My father was beside himself at the thought that Rangers would eclipse Jock Steins 9 in a row in that team. And he worked himself into a kind of frenzied state all season. And I genuinely worried that my father would pass away because I eventually had to say to him, stop watching the football match. You need to go away for 2 hours, come back, because he was getting uptight, right? He was better at games because he could control his emotions, but see, during watching the telly and stuff like that, so Celtic lost the first 2 games of the season, and Wim Jansen, oh no, it's all going pear-shaped, and Rangers can't win this, you know. And it wasn't just any title that was at stake that year. It was the mother of all Scottish Premier League titles. Don't care what MD says. It was important, you know, to preserve this piece of Scottish football history. You can equal it, but you'll never better it, and you'll never better that team. That team was just special. And Wim Jansen, a foreigner, like Ange, came from Japan and was thrust into this maelstrom. And as you say, probably the fact that he had no inclination of the vortex swirling around him helped to have a foreign manager, a calm persona at that moment in time. And on the day Celtic beat St Johnstone, my brother and my father went to the game. I was working for what I called the Paisley Gazzetta della Sport. It was the Paisley Gazette, and we covered St Mirren, and I covered them for the Record and stuff. They were playing Dundee, so it was a meaningless end-of-season match against Dundee. My father and my brother go to Celtic Park. They park at the McDonald's at the Parkhead Forge. Only one of them, they get one ticket, and my brother, to this day, who I slaughter, say to my dad, I'll toss you for it, instead of handing it to my dad, who's like, on the verge of a cardiac, right? I'm just like, and they have a toss for it, and my father loses a toss. So he used to sit in the car and listen to the radio. My brother runs away to Celtic Park and just like, seriously, you left them in the car? So I'm sitting at Love Street and St Mirren won 1-0. I don't care. Somebody says Henrik Larsson scored after the first 3 minutes. Okay. And I am motionless. And then Harold Brackback scores whatever minute it was, and I'm sitting my hands like that. Harold Brackback scored, and in my head, I'm just singing, Cheerio, Tenero. I'm singing that in my head. I'm motionless. I'm staring out at what's happening. And then I go down the stairs after the St Mirren game. I do all my thing, and I come out about an hour and a bit later. And I go, there's the car park at the old Love Street. If you've ever been to St Mirren, the old Love Street, there was a car park just outside the main stand. And sure enough, my brother and my father are standing. And I walk towards them, and lots of other journalists walking past as well. And I don't give a toss, Laura. The three of us do a huddle. We're jumping, we're shouting, we're screaming, singing, everything. Cheerio to Tenero, the whole shooting match for about 5 minutes. We are going off, we're not. There's tears, there's everything. I'm just happy my dad's still alive, right? And at one moment, the three of us just look at each other, and a kind of extraordinary moment of ESP, and we all go like that with a kind of imaginary glass to Wim Jansen. And that's my Wim Jansen story. We just kind of looked at each other and kind of had that moment, and we went, yeah, he gave us that. Wim Jansen gave us that moment. And just the euphoria, the relief. I think every Celtic supporter has a story. And from that day, and I called my dad and my brother the other night on the phone. And when they picked up the phone, the first thing we all said to each other was to Wim Jansen, because they knew exactly what I was going to say. And we raised a real glass. I said, you get a glass in your hand? And we all had a drink and down the phone, and because my brother stays in England. And so I just said to him, right, I'm having a drink, you having a? He went, aye. So we pulled the tipple of our choice and we had a wee drink to him. But I think the wonderful thing is, I put that on the Celtic Way, I put it on Facebook, and people come back with their own stories of what that season meant to them and their family, and old people of an older generation who remember Jock Steed's team like my dad. It was just brilliant to share that. And the moniker that they gave Scott Brown when he left, captain, leader, legend, I apply it to Wim Jansen, manager, leader, legend, because he will always be in the hearts and minds of the Celtic supporters. 1 year, but it was a title that mattered, and it mattered most. And to all the Celtic fans who were there, their nerves were shattered, their nails were bitten to the quick, but he will never be forgotten. And I spoke to Paul Lambert recently, who told me there's not much in the way of a tribute to Wim Jansen in and around Celtic Park. And I thought, that's sad. And he said he didn't want it for anyone else. It was not about what he said, it was for Wim himself. I'd like to see Celtic rectify that, because, as I said at the start, it was the mother of all league titles. You'll never have a situation like that again, because it went to the wire. And this jovial, curly-headed man who just looked like an old uncle or a granddad or whatever, and he just took it all in, and there's a lovely picture of him and Henrik Larsson, isn't there?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
And you look at that, and you look at those two men, and you think, in the last, in the history of the club, there's two guys that brought you unbridled joy. And if you bring unbridled joy to the Celtic supporters, you will be a legend in their eyes, in history forever. And you're still there. And I will say to every Celtic supporter, to Wim Jansen.
100%. I'm just looking at the comments and all the things flooding through the party on Royston Road, all the parties in Glasgow that night. I was actually at a party up the road at my friend's house, whose family are all Celtic daft, and we went there, and I was allowed to stay up past midnight, Tony, and celebrate that particular victory. It was fantastic. So we all had benefit from it. RIP Vim, thoughts of everybody at Axom and all of the Celtic support, I'm sure, are with the Janssen family. With that said, we'll leave you for today. It's been a great show, Tony, really enjoyed it. We'll be back for the match coverage against Dundee United tomorrow, and don't forget about that Alan Thompson interview that's coming up in the next few days. Keep your notifications on for that. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.